Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a beautiful last day of May, to another VDC-TV broadcast of Friday at 4, sponsored by Procter Gas and Ranmar Corporation. I'm your host, Guy Page, editor of the Vermont Daily Chronicle, here with social media director Paul Bean and our producer, Caleb Morvan. So, if you're trying to watch us on Facebook, that may not be happening, and Paul Bean will tell you now more what to do about that.
Yeah, so sorry very much, ladies and gentlemen, as we just went to load up the stream here. Something was wrong with the Facebook settings, and it just would not let me do it. And last minute, there's really nothing I could do. It was 4 o'clock, and I said, we're going to push it, and so here we are. So I'm going to go make a post on Facebook real quick so that everybody who is trying to watch us there knows to come watch on YouTube. And, I apologize to anybody for any complications. You can watch us live on my X account. You can also watch it on YouTube, and you can watch live on my Instagram. So we're there. We're out there. Hope everybody can find us, and we do apologize, and we hope to hear from you. So
YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, it's all there.
I'm going to make the post now.
Great. Okay. So, Paul, I love the new studio, by the way.
Thank you.
And the flag, that's so cool. Just in today's Chronicle, we did a story on the history of that flag, which is the Vermont battle flag. It was the first one that was carried by General John Stark at the Battle of Bennington, and is now the flag for the Green Mountain Boys, for the Air Guard Green Mountain Boys. So, really cool.
From what I understand, if I'm not mistaken, is that flag was the Vermont state flag for an extended period of time. Like somebody out there will probably know the answer to this, but I believe at one point, I believe it was the 1950s, they started to take a lot of the U.S. states' flags and kind of like gentrify them to make them look the same. Mm-hmm. And one of them happened to be the state of Vermont. So I'd have to double. Somebody out there fact check me, but I'm pretty sure that's true.
Okay, Vermont historians out there, feel free to comment and fact check us. And by the way, comments, questions, observations, we're all over that. Join us live on chat and comments. So, Paul, the big news, the gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
The New York State Court verdict yesterday finding former president and this year's GOP presidential presumptive nominee Donald Trump guilty of 34 counts, 34 felony counts. So today on the Chronicle, we published 2 very different responses, and we want to know yours. We want to know what you think about this. First one we had was GOP activist Ed Wheeler of Middlebury. Well, here's what he had to say. Quote, "There's no longer any doubt. Guilt has now been proven. Not the phony verdict of the corrupt New York State Court, but the true nature and traitorous activities of the Democratic Party. Not only have Democrats adopted the philosophy of Marxism, but also the tactics and total disregard for the rule of law and the U.S. Constitution. Our judicial system has been politicized, and it will take significant purging to restore its intended nature. The RNC and maybe others should take this outrageous outcome directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. Meanwhile, we the people are not going to let the Marxists take down the United States. We will prevail in November." And meanwhile, Democrat Senator Peter Welch had a different take on this. He reminded us that, quote, "no person is above the law." He said that we've seen a fair justice system at play, and that and to quote him, "the former president and his supporters must respect that. Donald Trump spent this trial attacking the judge, the prosecutors, the witnesses, the jurors, and others who were not remotely involved in this case. Unfortunately, this behavior is part of a finger wagging, a dangerous pattern of inciting his supporters to target those with whom he disagrees, as we all remember from January 6th. So, these are the 2 points of view that we published in the Chronicle. Your comments are welcome. And Paul, you and I were just sort of briefly discussing the downstream ramifications of what this might mean in Vermont. And we agreed that there's not really a really close connection that we could see, but sort of troubled by this use of the courts.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like we were saying, I don't think that there's any instance where we can point to somebody and say, okay, they're going after an individual in a similar way that they've gone after Trump. However, I think when we take a look at some of the ways that the state's institutions sometimes get weaponized, and the court system for that matter, and we kind of were talking a little bit about your little joke there, lawsuits for thee but not for me,
right.
Yeah,
right,
and how the state legislature is interested in lawsuits if it goes along with a particular ideological, with a particular ideology. And so, for example, we just see now the state is suing big oil, quote unquote, whatever that exactly means, because of climate change damages. Meanwhile, if we wanted to sue, Planned Parenthood, for example, that's not allowed. And this is something you were talking a little bit more about. So maybe you could add to it, right, because I don't.
Right. I've seen this the last 2 or 3 years. There's a passel of legislation, a lot of which is passed, which kind of explicitly encourages lawsuits against big oil, against the state of Vermont, suing ourselves if we don't reach the carbon emissions goals set by the Global Warming Solutions Act.
Well, any third party can sue us, from what I understand.
Yes.
Am I mistaken on that?
That's right. So, and that will, of course, be, Vermont Natural Resources Council or someone like that, or VPIRG or someone. Their lawyers will do very well, and we will be paying our lawyers to defend them.
They would love that opportunity, wouldn't they? Yeah. And they can continue their. Well, anyway, I do see this not just as a concern downstream in Vermont, but I think that ultimately we're setting the precedent in the United States that this is something that we're doing now. And you've seen this in communist Russia. You've seen this in Maoist China. They'll use the court system to go after political enemies. I mean, the Nazis were doing that. Hitler was big on that. That's how he was able to take out and actually imprison a lot of his political enemies. And that's really scary. And that's the thing is with the way that this ideology with the socialism, the climate-topians, if you will, they're willing to go to any length to accomplish what they think is necessary in terms of like saving the planet, right? Like they will put somebody like a President Trump in jail. They don't have any quarrels about that, and that's really scary, because how do they? We're assuming that they're right about the proposition that climate change is real, or at least it's being caused by CO2 emissions, and where does this go, right? Like it's just so mind-boggling to think about, and they're really extreme when it comes down to it, and that's what scares me. And I don't know about you, Guy, but I wouldn't want to be in Trump's position right now.
That's right, and he willingly took it on. He said, I'm going to take this. I'm going to bear the brunt.
Yeah.
And I find myself a lot of times when he talks, I think, I wish he wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think he's right about this, and I think even if by the absolute letter of the law he was guilty of what they charged him, I don't really know that he was, since it was a great liar, Michael Cohen, upon whom all of the real evidence came from. 99.9% of it came from him. So that alone, you'd think a jury would go, this guy's a liar.
Yeah.
He's a known liar. But even if it turns out in this case they were right, maybe, I don't know, I'm not a legal expert, I'm absolutely convinced, and no one will ever convince me otherwise, that the multitude of cases here are an attempt to get Donald Trump. This would never happen, has never happened, to any other political figure in the history of the country.
That's right.
He could have done this, absolutely done this to Hillary Clinton.
while he was president.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he said, you know what? And people would say, look her up. And he'd go, you know what? No, we don't work that way.
Yeah.
So what troubles me the most isn't so much what happens now, although it really does trouble me what happens now. What troubles me is, let's say the next president sees someone else and a precedent is set. What an awful, awful thing.
Yeah.
This should not be happening.
So we do have a couple comments. Just real quick, Guy, if you want to lower your mic down just a little bit, it's kind of blocking your face just a little. Anyway.
Can't have that.
No, we can't have that. Libby Moyer writes in, hi there. This litigious event in New York event was exacted to disrupt the GOP and its July convention to its core. Michael Cohen is a knucklehead, and it is Trump who hired and confided him.
So maybe not a good choice of hiring right there.
No, probably not. And I want to also add, too, I believe Trump came out and said when he does his, like, walkouts of the court and he comes out and he, like, talks to the press and talks to the people. You've seen him do these things a couple times. And he was like, I polled here at, like, 6 or 7% in this district. Like, we don't win here.
Right.
Like, this is obvious. They just hate me. And they don't want me to have anything on the show, or excuse me, they don't want me to be the president of the United States in this space. So we have another comment from David Kurtsetter. Would you bet your paycheck on a weather forecast for tomorrow? If not, then why should this country bet billions on global warming predictions that have even less foundation? Thomas Sowell. It's a quote.
Wow. Good one. I'm waiting for the court trial of some Democrat, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or someone in, I don't know, Provo, Utah, Huntsville, Alabama, maybe, West Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the jury there is not be big fans of either of those folks.
It's actually a really good point. We can talk all day about Trump in this case and New York City. Of course he's not liked in New York City. I mean, it's well known at this point. I mean, Rudy Giuliani at one point was the mayor of New York, who was very close to Trump, and now not anymore. Obviously, he's not the mayor anymore, but the city itself is not what it was, and not to mention, the hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens that are currently in New York City. But that's a whole other subject. I guess the point, though, is New York City is not what it was before 2000, the year 2000.
And the 600,000 homeless.
Oh, that's a big.
Yeah.
That's the population of Vermont.
Yeah, it's some number like that. I could be, but not by too much, misstating it. Did you say there was another comment too, Paul?
No, that's
okay.
all. That's all so far.
That's fine. Well, so our main segment today, though, you may remember, town meeting. More than 30 towns said no, heck no to school budgets, and which is not a great surprise. Well, the high number was, but not the fact that they said no. But the really great surprise was that when those budgets were voted again the second time, about 25 voted no again. And now there is one school district that as of Thursday has now voted no 4 times against their school budget. That's Slate Valley down in Addison and Rutland counties. It straddles the county line. So we have something going on here where there aren't as many towns. Now it's now down actually to about 13 towns. But I would say that the tax revolt is still going on because they went from, I'm sorry folks, I'm just sort of trying to gather my thoughts here. Well, let's talk about Slate Valley. The Slate Valley Unified Union School District, Castleton, little town of Benson, Orwell. Well, when they voted down the third time, the school budget said, we're going to put it up for a fourth, but we're not going to cut a dime. We've already cut enough. And you had legislators like Representative Peter Conlon from Cornwall, chair of the Education Committee, Senator Ruth Hardy, chair of the Government Ops Committee in the Senate, also Addison County, tell the press that, well, the school boards, they've really cut budgets as much as they possibly could. But voters in Slate Valley, anyway, seem to think otherwise. They seem to think that someone, whether it was a school budget, the local school board, or maybe the legislature, like Pete Conlon and Ruth Hardy, maybe they should have cut something somewhere. So we got an email from former Castleton town attorney and moderator John Burke, and he said, this school board is pretty tone deaf. I tried to tell them that some movement downward would tip this vote, but they chose to ignore the voters. I hope our students listen better than the board. So this 2024 property revolt continues. Down to 13, but I've never in June, in my memory, I've been covering towns and school districts since 1979, and I never remember more than just one or two going 3 months without a school budget. And now there's 13. And I think really, Paul, the only reason they got down to the 13 was because they managed to cut the property tax, the estimated property tax, all the way down to 13 to 14% by creating two whole new taxes, by creating an Airbnb tax.
What do they call that? Isn't that a robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Yeah, robbing Peter to pay Paul's property taxes. Yeah. Right. And so maybe a few of them saw that and said, okay, they're trying to do something, not realizing that, well, actually, if I ever do a B&B or if I'm paying for the taxes on my software, they're going to get me there too. And I think maybe some voters were saying, look, if we go past July 1, that means our school districts would be borrowing money for operating expenses at today's high interest rates.
It's pretty scary.
Well, we don't like it. In fact, we hate it, but what are we going to do? But still, there's 13 towns out there who are saying, not having it. For example, on Tuesday, we're looking at some Grand Isle County towns, Milton, Fairfax, some small towns in Windsor and Windham counties. And then on June 11th, we've got the larger towns of Brandon, Swanton, and Bristol, with a lot of the surrounding towns around them also voting. So there's some, and then there's this really weird situation. When I say Plainfield, you're a Washington County kid.
Yes, sir.
When I say Plainfield, What do you think of?
I think of Plainfield. I mean, the town itself. I mean, what do you mean? I think Twinfield Union is the school.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but politically, generally speaking, how do they flow?
Progressive.
Very progressive. Goddard College was
that's
there.
right. Yeah.
But Plainfield and Marshfield, at their town meeting, they voted yes for their school budget, but it was this close. And so someone asked for a recount, or no, not a recount, but a revote. And on the revote, they voted it down.
Interesting.
Plainfield.
Wow.
Plainfield.
Well,
Goddard College. They voted it down.
Those are beautiful houses up there on Plainfield. That's probably why. I mean, there's some of these people who probably, I mean, let's be real. I mean, I bet they're not completely loaded rich. I bet they're just reasonably well off, but they're looking at their property and what it's worth, and they're saying, oh my goodness, I'm going to be paying $600 or $700 more a year. And I mean, those are there's big properties up there, and there's really beautiful homes, old Vermont homes for that matter. And they can't take the hit. They can't take the hit. Who can? But they can't.
And that's it. They can't take the hit. And that's all across the state. That's what we've been seeing.
I mean, that's why we're selling creamies down here. not exactly, but
well, at least you're doing something about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So they're up on June 11th too, but you also gotta wonder: is this just about the property taxes, or are there a lot of people also who are? There's other things about the school district that they've been unhappy about for a long time.
this school district. It's
Oh,
specific.
all school districts.
All school districts.
Education in Vermont.
Yeah. Well, is it even just about education in Vermont? And by the way, this goes out to the chat. Anybody who's listening, is this just about education in Vermont or property taxes, for that matter? If you're listening and you want to chime in, we'd love to hear from you. But I think it's more of a political shift, to be honest with you, Guy. I think it's a big signal that the taxpayer, and not only the taxpayer, but the Vermont voter as a whole, is maybe starting to consider other options.
Huh.
Do you think so?
I think that after we hear from our sponsors, that we're going to be talking about that, because it's something, frankly, I have not thought much about. I'm glad you have, and yeah, we're definitely going to be bringing that up. Does this show some sort of sea change? Well, speaking of sponsors, I had the pleasure of interviewing one of our sponsors, Judy Taranovich, at the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association. She's the owner of Procter Gas, at the VFDA meeting this week in Manchester. And I asked her what she thinks is the problem in Montpelier, and she said, I'm here with Judy Taranovich, Procter Gas, Vice President of the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association. And Judy has testified a lot at the Vermont State House on energy policy. Judy, you were just telling me a little while ago what you see as the main problem with what's going on right now in Montpelier. What is that?
I feel that we are talking to a lot of legislatures that basically have earmuffs on. They're not listening to our side of the story, and I really feel that they're up there to serve all of us, yes? So to make an informed and educated decision, it's their responsibility to listen to both sides of the story. And if they go with electric only, that's fine, but at least they've given us the decency and respect to hear our side. And maybe what we have to say would tweak their decisions a little bit, because I really feel we have a great story to tell. We are an important part of the energy structure in Vermont, and for our security, we need all fuels at the table.
So what's the solution up there in Montpelier? What needs to happen?
So sadly, I think there needs to be a change in government. I think we need to find more centric legislatures. Every time I go up there, I feel like it's the Hatfields and McCoys. Nobody's listening to anybody, and we won't get anything done that way. And back in the old days, there was sort of a more balanced legislature, and you had to work together to come out with a solution. And I think it was better for all. Right now, it's a runaway train. So center is better.
Thank you, Judy Taranovich, Procter Gas, Vice President, Vermont Fuel Dealers Association. I also want to thank our other sponsor, Ranmar Corporation. Owner and founder Randy Rulo of Berlin, Vermont, my town, has been building beautiful, affordable single-family homes in Vermont for decades. Ranmar serves central Vermont and surrounding areas with excavation, construction, and real estate services since 1979. They're a local, family-owned company committed to the values of Vermont. Their residential building division, Village Homes, specializes in affordable, energy-efficient, modular, and manufactured home projects. So, Paul, we have some comments, right?
Yes, we do. First and foremost, I just want to say sorry about the feedback on the audio. I thought I had the solution today because it did happen, I guess, last time we did a video, and I thought I just needed to cut the mics. But that did not work, so I have some work to do on my end. I apologize, everybody. Hope that's okay. They did hear it. They could hear it fine.
Good. So we weren't just...
No, it wasn't. No, they could hear it, but it was just like a little echoey. First and foremost, Libby Moyer writes, phew, there's a procedure in place. 87% solution crafters of Act 127. Act 887 neglected and obviously should have foreseen the potential of interest rates in response to any outcome. I just want to chime in quickly on that. I don't remember which legislator I was speaking to, but a few weeks ago, towards the end of session, they told me this idea. It might have been Scott Peck, but I could be wrong on that. instead of borrowing 87% for the full year, which this is something they would have to do at this point, I believe. They wanted to make the change that you could borrow 87% at a month at a time, rather than being on this interest rate, this high interest rate with a private lender, which is just so crazy, by the way, to fund the school. So that is an option that's out there, or potentially something they might be trying to do. I think it's actually not a bad idea. Just Kevin Ryan writes, Judy's great. Met her 2 weeks ago. Exclamation point. Thank you, Kevin. Mm-hmm. Kevin also writes, would someone please explain to me how CO2 floats up when it's heavier than air? That's a question for another day, I think. And Tom Koch, to be very clear, he writes, it's not just property taxes. It's a lack of confidence in what we're getting for our money. Modern math, quote unquote, graduates who can't spell, etc. Well, he's talking about me. Not just kidding. He's not talking. But and we have David Kurtzetter writes one more. Our children leaving the state to work elsewhere too. Exclamation point.
So Tom Koch raises a really. So obviously we hit a live nerve there.
Yeah, we did
when we talked about the schools.
Yeah.
That it's not just about the property taxes. And Tom, you were saying that there's a real problem with our education. Not only can having trouble counting, but reading. We were all taught using phonics, sound something out, right? And for some reason, the last 10 or 15 years, our education establishment said, oh, no, we're going to use a different system, which is just demonstrably does not work as well. So our kids do not read as well because they're being taught poorly. That's one of the core reasons. Finally, they passed a law this year saying, maybe we ought to pay more attention to phonics. In fact, the governor signed that yesterday. It was one of the bills in the paper today. So just things like, really? You're teaching them to read the wrong way for all these years?
Well, they're trying to reinvent the wheel, I think.
I guess.
It seems like to me that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So people, as Tom was saying, they're not only unhappy with property taxes, they're looking at the product and they're saying, you know what? This guy's charging me $8 for a creamy that always melts. I'm going to go down to Paul Bean's place and get creamy for half the price. That's really good. And as David Kerstatter said, people are moving out of state, and that's one reason why.
Yeah,
There's other reasons, but that's one of them.
Just Kevin Ryan, they must have wrote it at the same time. He writes 70+% grads leaving Vermont.
Wow.
And Libby also writes, correct on month to month, but schools set up finance, not state, but state made the laws. And she also writes, neither can the legislators count or read, including who is in the room and what we the people are saying. That's a good one.
I think in their case it's selective.
It is selective.
Read what they want to see and they hear what they want to hear.
That's right. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Or what their leadership, rather, wants them to hear. With a few exceptions. And speaking of one of those exceptions, Caleb Elder from Addison County is a Democrat, really a very liberal Democrat, who also is one of the very few who's willing to pound the table and tell the leadership, you're crazy, this isn't going to work, especially on housing last year. He practically barred the doors and started holding hands with all the other people having a demonstration against some slow action on more housing. So he's not afraid to sort of take on the leadership. He is a House member, is running for the Senate in Addison County. And I guess this is sort of getting into what our next segment, where you're going to be talking somewhat about the elections and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, it is 4:33. I don't know if you want to keep. We can keep going. Happy to.
Well,
but my knowledge thus far is somewhat limited on from what I've heard. Okay. I've heard some candidates. I know there's one candidate up in Waterbury. Her name's Elizabeth Brown. She's running as a Democrat for Tom Stevens. Is that his name?
Right.
And Tom Teresa
Wood.
Teresa Wood.
Couple of chairs, yeah.
Yep, couple of chairs, couple of really big chairs.
Yeah.
So she's running as a Democrat, and I don't know what exactly her plan is, what kind of Democrat she is, but that is a new jump into the race, which people don't. I'm sure people are finding out about now. We talked about John Rogers last week, who's jumped into. That's probably one of the only contested statewide elections. Unfortunately, he's going to be the big. That's going to be a big one from my perspective. I don't know if you would agree with me on that.
Oh yeah. For one thing, it's a primary.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
And also, you are if he does get the Republican nomination, he's running against the likely nominees, Dave Zuckerman, who's fairly well entrenched and well known, but also definitely on the progressive side. And you were getting to this, Paul, before we went to the sponsors, that you're seeing a change. And how would that play out, for example, in that particular race of Rogers against Zuckerman, if they end up being the nominees?
Well, I think if that is the change, right? I mean, you had Rogers, who was a Democrat in the legislature for 16 years, both 8 years in the House and 8 years in the Senate. And I guess, that's a big shift for somebody to make. And I think he is symbolic in that sense, because in my opinion, he represents to me what Vermont Democrat really used to mean. I mean, when I was growing up, that's the type of Democrat that I would think of. And, there's always that joke. It's like, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Vermont Democratic Party left me, or the Democratic Party left me.
Right.
And I think that's a pretty common theme happening right now in the United States. You're seeing this with people like RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. That was a big one. Did I say her name right? Gabbard? I
think it's Gabbard.
Yeah, it's Gabbard. I'm pretty sure it is. But that's the shift, and I think especially amongst young people, such as some of my peers and people even younger. I mean, they just look at all this, woke stuff, and they just they laugh. I mean, there's certain factions, especially the college kids, that maybe get a little more brainwashed than others, but a lot of us are just like, this is totally insane. I don't identify with this whatsoever. And we need some more reality. And it's unfortunate that there's not as many statewide positions that are being contested. But from what I understand, is there's quite a few legislative seats that are. So I have a couple comments here too, if I could chime in. C. Geddes writes, and I know of college students right now going into education who plan to work in the poor areas of Vermont for 4 years, when their student loans will be paid off, and then leave Vermont. So is that a thing that we do here? Do we pay teachers student loans?
We do. I think, yes, they have to work here for a little while, and then they're out of here. Right.
We have David Kurtsetter. He writes, we need to get the vote out for Gerald Malloy, who is running against the entrenched Bernie Sanders. No opponents running against Becca Ballant. Help! ! Yeah. And let's see. Roger Bouchard writes, Rogers is pro-abortion and supports weed. Yeah, he is a hemp farmer. That is true. Yeah. He grows and cannabis, I believe.
And a lot of people don't know that yes, he has a strong background in that kind of agriculture. Yeah.
Just Kevin Ryan writes, how about Joe Manchin leaving the Democrats?
Good example. Yeah, of course, that's in another state, but that's right.
I mean, this is happening all over the country. It's not limited to here. And I got to be honest, I think a big chunk of it has to do with Elon Musk buying X. Just throwing that out there.
Really? What's the connection?
Well, I think that, first and foremost, you found a space where people are able to communicate with each other, and they're common voices are finding each other more so than they ever had before. And Tucker Carlson had a guest on a couple months ago, actually, who was talking about this concept, and it's in a lot of our minds as it is.
He's on X, isn't he?
Tucker? Yeah, his whole show's on X.
Oh, that's right.
I know, we're on X, thankfully, but I mean,
us and Tucker.
Yeah, that's right. We're competing with Tucker. But I guess the point though is there's just, by him doing that, all of a sudden it just shook up the playing field so much, right. And all of a sudden these voices that were really kind of shadow banned from each other is a good way to describe it, are now finding each other. And that's also loosened up all the restriction on Instagram. It's Meta as a whole. I mean, and YouTube for that matter. I mean, there were certain subjects, if you discussed on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, you would be banned immediately just a couple of years ago. And now that's not happening anymore. And I think it's because the competition in the playing field has been leveled. And X is like just, in my opinion, it's so much better than any.
The cartel has been broken up. Is that what you're saying?
I think it has been.
Wow.
Yeah. And whether or not I love everything Elon Musk is up to, I don't. But he's pretty cool for buying X. Yeah.
That's why I pay this guy the not so big bucks, because he actually understands some of the social media stuff. That's really cool.
You didn't know any of this guy?
Well, not like you do.
Yeah, I
obviously.
study it.
Yeah, I'm still back in the newspaper world, unfortunately.
Oh, stop that.
Well, I am. I still think that way.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Okay. Well, as far as I'll give a quick county by county breakdown of some of the Senate races, because there's some pretty cool stuff happening there. Like in Chittenden counties, what the like Winooski and Essex district, 3 incumbents: Tanya Vyhovsky, strident progressive; Martine Gulick, yeah, kind of; and Phil Baruth, who's every Second Amendment lover's least favorite senator. They're all from that district. Dropped into that primary now is Stuart Ledbetter.
That's right.
Who, if you know him from TV, and Stu is a case of what you see, which is sort of calm, thoughtful, not going to be carried away by anything. That is actually who he is from my interaction with him as a journalist. That he's, you were talking about sort of the old school Democrats.
Yeah.
I kind of see Stu that way.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've got a feeling, given the winds of change that you were just talking about,
Yeah.
he may do very well.
Okay.
Depends on how he runs and everything, but he could do well. In Windsor County, where Dick McCormick is leaving, there are 5 Democrats, including 2 incumbents and 3 new people, looking for the nominations, a 3-seat district, and I believe 4 Republicans. So there's a serious primary for both Republicans and Democrats in Windsor County for those Senate seats. And you may remember, Paul, there was a big kerfluffle about the Republican Party in Windsor County and sort of who controls it. Is it going to be pro-MAGA or never Trumpers?
That's right.
And I mean, they might not like being characterized that way, but I think it's pretty fair. Yeah. And there are candidates of both camps running there for the Republican nomination in Windsor County. And one of the other Chittenden districts, there's a doctor named Lewis Myers, who's a strong proponent of healthcare cost control. And he in particular is taking aim at Senator Ginny Lyons, who's the chair of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, which has a lot to do, of course, with healthcare insurance.
Yeah.
So you have 4 people in a 3-seat race there. And down in Bennington County, Brian Campion is not running again.
Too bad.
Yeah, and you have Joe Gervais. I think that's how he has one of those unpronounceable names that actually no, it has about 7 different Vermont pronunciations. It's Gervais, whatever, and I can never remember which one it is. It's like, how do you spell the name? Boucher. How do you pronounce that?
Boucher.
Boucher. Well, that's one. I know a Boucher.
Caleb, how would you say it? Boucher. Yeah, Boucher.
Obviously, in Northfield, that's the way
it's French Canadian, man.
Yeah, but it's been changed. There's Bushy. There's some people pronounce Bushy. It's that Boucher, which basically means mouthy. Boucher. Is just all over the place, and Gervais is one of those. So anyway, English lesson over. Joe will be running for we'll just call him Joe, will be running for the Senate seat in Bennington County as a Republican. And there was a a gadfly, a Democrat named Cynthia Browning, who every time there was a big important vote that the Democrats really wanted passed, she would stand up and tell everyone why they shouldn't vote for it. She was an oppositional character, and they would say, "Why aren't you a Republican?" Well, I'm not a Republican. I'm a Democrat, but I'm just, again, more of an old school Democrat.
Sure.
She's running for Senate as an independent in Bennington County. So, and last but not least, for primaries in Orleans County, we have Sam Douglas.
That's right.
The young guy, head of the Vermont Young Republicans, and a fellow named Conrad Bellavance, who's from, I believe, Derby, and he's more like my age, and quite a lot of experience in business. Friend of Russ Ingalls, who's the Essex County senator. So you will have a primary there.
That's right.
In Orleans County.
Well, what about the Democratic end? I believe there's a primary too for them. Am I not mistaken?
I don't know that there's a primary. Catherine Sims is the only one I know of who's running. But see, the thing is that list that we had this morning, I don't think it was supposedly, even though the deadline was yesterday, I don't think it was really final. For example, Ruth Hardy, Senator Ruth Hardy, Addison County, was not on the list. So I really thought there was going to be a primary of Caleb Elder, Chris Bray, Ruth Hardy. But she's not on the list. And she's also someone who had in committee, you never diss your committee chair in a committee meeting. You never just say, why are you doing that? Why do we have to do this again? You never, ever say that. Well, Ruth Hardy said that to Ginny Lyons.
Interesting.
And so one wonders if she maybe sort of knew, I'm out of here anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm going to be anxious to find out in the next few
surprised
days.
by that.
Is she in or is she out?
That's surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with these lists. It's just with the Secretary of State's office.
Right.
I've heard all sorts of funny stuff about this, the signatures and petitions this year. I mean, you heard the rumor about the petitions, and there had to be wet ink or something like that.
Oh, actually, that was there was a lot of back and forth in that. Some of the candidates who have been, for years, these perennial candidates have been sending in photocopies of their petitions, thinking that's okay. This is just what we do. Well, they got the word for the first time this year. Oh, no. We need the wet ink.
They decided
we need the originals. The Secretary of State's did.
I'm actually I don't know. Maybe they've been doing it for a certain way for a certain amount of time, but I kind of agree with I kind of like the wet ink concept. It kind of makes more sense to me. Like that seems like legit, and it seems very secure. And
that's right. If you want election security, maybe it does make sense. And in fact, the Secretary of State's elections administrator said, the law says we need to inspect, peruse, and validate the petitions.
Right.
Well, how in the world are we supposed to inspect a photocopy?
Well, that's just it. We do have some comments, by the way. Nothing crazy. Roger Butch Bouchard says, "Thank goodness for Vermont Daily Chronicle." Libby Moyer writes, "God bless Vermont Daily Chronicle and Guy Page."
Oh, hey, and Paul Bean, too.
Amen.
And Caleb Morvan.
Amen. Thank you very much.
And Jim Page. And Mike Belosky.
Lambert Saldi writes, "Kangaroo Court, period, exclamation point. Who gives two..." I can't say that word. About
Bert uses it all the time.
What the liberal
but you
leftist dem swamp rats have to say, period. A rat emoji. Nice. Just Kevin Ryan writes, "Yeah, try Bellaloo or Charlie Boys, LOL." How do you say those ones?
What's the first one?
Beaulieu. Bellaloo.
And
Charlie Boys.
Charles Bois. Or, as they say in Vermont, Charlie Boys.
Charlie Boys. Yeah.
It's like Notre Dame Cathedral. Oh, excuse me. Notre Dame, if you actually speak French. But no, we need to call it Notre Dame.
Our Lady.
Whatever, I know, French major. What can I say?
Our Lady.
Yeah.
Libby Moyer writes, "Molloy filed Tuesday, and we documented the procedure on video by NBC, CBS, and ABC, who broadcasted it." Wow, good for them.
I saw them. They were all there. Good for them. And I think props to Gerald Malloy, because a few days before then, the St. Albans Messenger had written an editorial by a longtime newspaperman, Emerson Lynn, who should have known better, saying that basically the only serious candidate for Senate is Bernie Sanders. And Gerald Malloy said, whoa, au contraire, I've run once already, been running all the time.
That's right.
The GOP is in resurgence in many measurable ways. Where do you get off not saying that? So I do wonder if maybe he put the word out and maybe our colleagues in the electronic media showed up.
That's actually just a quick point before we finish here, but a lot of people have been talking about the GOP has like been in decline. Gotta say, this whole Trump thing, I mean, that might have just really revised that they made a really big mistake doing what they did.
I think so.
It's gonna be interesting to watch and find out.
It broke the website last night.
That's right.
For one thing.
That's it.
And that picture we had of Trump saying political prisoner, that came off of his website this morning.
Yeah.
That wasn't anyone's meme. That was Trump himself saying, hey, look at me, political prisoner.
And I think even some close people close to me that hate him. I mean, they're like, well, this is kind of weird because this is what they got him on. I mean, charges of hush money from a porn star. I mean, there's other things I feel like you could have gone after him for, but this is what they got. So I it's so bizarre.
Well, I'm sure, Paul, in the history of Washington, D.C., he's the first person to use campaign funds to pay off, to make payments for hush money.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm sure it's just never happened.
Oh, I'm sure it's never happened. It seems like it's pretty commonplace.
Right.
And we're not defending him, by the way. It's still a wrong thing to do.
Right.
But
and I hope he, as a man, if he hasn't already, he looks at this and he has his David and Bathsheba moment, and he says, you know what? Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. I've done a really wrong thing here.
Yeah.
I hope he does. Yeah,
maybe
I mean, that's just a man-to-man thing. But.
And just maybe one more comment before we go. Roger Butch Bouchard, which that's how you say that, by the way.
Is this Robert Bouchard?
Yeah, no, Roger.
Roger. Oh,
Butch,
Roger, yes.
Roger Butch Bouchard.
Great guy.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe the elections in Vermont are rigged! ! Well, we want to hear more. You should write into the Vermont Daily Chronicle with maybe some of your concerns. And we know Mike Belowowski is also a little bit concerned about that too.
Yeah,
so
he's been all over that.
So anyhow, folks, what do you think, Guy? You ready to close it out?
I think we're about done. So anyway, folks, thank you very much. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube page. Hit the like button, all that stuff. And we will see you next Friday at 4, VDC-TV. And don't tell my wife,